little bit for a few minutes as we are waiting for everyone to come on board. I will ask that everybody go ahead and mute themselves so that we're not speaking over each other. Hi, Inez, I see you. All right.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. Okay. Should we go ahead and get started? In the interest of time, we have a lot of ground to cover. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. We've got two kind of just initial screens that we'll go through, and then we're gonna do a little bit of housekeeping just to explain how to access the translation if you need this presentation in Spanish. So I'm gonna repeat that in Spanish. Vamos a tener algunas hojas que vamos a hacer ahorita y ya después vamos a hablar acerca de cómo se puede accesar la traducción si es que necesita la traducción en español. Entonces vamos a comenzar. Creo que ya estamos todos aquí. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liliana Sturgis. I'm an immigration attorney with the Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County. I work for the Santa Cruz County Immigration Project. And tonight we're going to be talking about DACA updates as of today, the 15th of December. And I'm going to hand it off briefly to my coworker, the lovely Paulina, to talk to us a little bit about some housekeeping and how to maneuver around this Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Lily. Buenas noches, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Paulina Moreno. Soy una de las directoras aquí con Community Action Board. Esta tarde estamos ofreciendo la sesión en inglés y en español. Para los que no están familiarizados con cómo utilizar la traducción, hay un icono, si están usando su computadora, debajo donde demuestra interpretación. En este caso, si quieren escuchar la presentación en español, por favor de seleccionar español. Y tenemos esta tarde a Oscar Ríos ayudándonos con la traducción. Si están están conectándose con nosotros desde su iPad, hay también las tres bolitas al mero arriba donde pueden seleccionar interpretación de idioma. Y ahí también, por favor, de seleccionar español. Y si nos están acompañando esta tarde por medio de su celular, también hay una opción en su celular donde pueden seleccionar su idioma de preferencia. De nuevo, si quieren escucharnos esta tarde en español, por favor de seleccionar español. The next slide. Y es bien importante, les vamos a pedir a todos esta tarde que por favor pongan su bocina en mute, hay un icono donde pueden seleccionar mute para apagar el micrófono y desde sus teléfonos necesitan presionar el asterisco y el número 6 y eso los va a ayudar a ponerse en mute. Y vamos también si tienen preguntas, hay muchísima información que vamos a cubrir, pero si tienen preguntas, vamos a utilizar el chat. Por ahí vamos a estar tomando cuenta de todas las preguntas que vienen para así poder decirle a Lili y que nos conteste. Okay. So, gracias y bienvenidos.
Thank you, Paulina. Okay, so for those of you that have joined us since we began, again, my name is Lily Sturgis. I'm an immigration attorney with the Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County. Tonight, we're going to be talking about DACA updates through today. And before we get into it, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and what we offer to the community. So our mission is to partner with the community to eliminate poverty and create social change through advocacy and essential services. We have some core programs. One is the homelessness prevention and essential services. We provide through that program rental assistance and emergency payments. We also have employment and reentry services. We have a program called Alcance, and we also have the Day Worker Center in Live Oak. We have immigration legal services, and that's where I work. We have the Immigration Project that is housed primarily in Watsonville. And we also have the Thriving Immigrants Initiative. We have also community building and youth development through our Davenport Resource Service Center. I will be showing the slides in both English and in Spanish, just so that we can all have access to all the information. A little bit of information about CAB and our immigration project. We began in Watsonville in 1987, and we have been offering services outside of our main Watsonville office, specifically beginning with the Day Worker Center in Live Oak. We started that in 2018. And then we also began offering services out of our Davenport Resource Service Center in 2019. And pre-pandemic, we were both, we had two of us, myself and my coworker Ben, housed out of Cabrillo and Aptos, and then also Cabrillo in Watsonville. And we are both available to both sites as well. We just can't really be on site at the moment. Our telephone number is here, as well as our email addresses. This is our lovely building. We're right here on the second floor, right outside of La Placita in downtown Watsonville. And a little bit about the services that we provide at SCIP. We do renewals of green cards and work permits, DACA renewals, citizenship applications, petitions for family members, VAWA applications, temporary protective status, consular processing, U visas, family preparedness, and childcare safety plans. And we don't at the time do asylum or deportation defense. And to this list, I failed to add that we will be doing initial DACA applications as well as advanced parole applications for DACA holders. Let me briefly just have this up. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how we got here. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because we all want to know about the meat of the conversation. Where are we now and what can we do going forward? But I do kind of want to talk a little bit about how we got here. And if you've been following this at all, it's been kind of a ping-ponging every couple of weeks or every month there's a new decision and we are back to square one or we're somewhere else and we have no guidance. So let's start kind of from the beginning. It's not from the beginning, but September 5th, 2017, the Trump administration through DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, tried to stop the DACA program. What they did was they stopped being able to take initial applications, and they also stopped offering advanced parole for DACA holders. And this immediately began to be litigated. It all culminated in the Supreme Court decision that came down on the 18th of June in 2020. And in that decision, the Supreme Court said that it did have the power to review the Department of Homeland Security's decision to terminate DACA. They decided that the process that DHS or the Department of Homeland Security to terminate DACA was unlawful. And they also said, and this is the big one that everyone is kind of saying over and over, they said that DHS's termination of DACA was arbitrary and capricious, and it was in violation of Administrative Procedures Act. After this, we kind of were left in limbo for a little bit. And the reason for that was we had the Supreme Court saying that DACA could not be terminated in the way that DHS tried to terminate it, but they did not say that DACA could live on forever. And what they did do was give DHS kind of a clear pathway to shut down DACA. And we couldn't move forward until we had information from USCIS as to how they were going to take on new cases. So we waited for a while. And then we had another case come down called Casa de Maryland. That came down on the 17th of July of this year. And it said that everything had to go back to pre-September 5th, 2017. That meant USCIS had to start taking applications, advanced parole had to begin. But again, we just had no information from USCIS as to how that was going to move forward. So fast forward to the 28th of July, USCIS finally puts out a communication. This is now the famous Wolf Memorandum. And what it said was that despite what the Supreme Court stated, they were actually going to reject first-time DACA applications. They were going to reject advanced parole requests unless they were under exceptional circumstances. And they would continue to process renewals, but instead of issuing renewals for 2 years, they would be for 1 year. So that effectively created a doubling of the cost of DACA because now everyone had to renew every year instead of every 2 years.
Lily,
yes.
Can I really quickly announce the Spanish translation for anybody who may have entered late? Muy buenas noches, bienvenidos si nos acaban de acompañar. Tenemos traducción al español disponible. En su computadora debe haber un mundo abajo, a mano derecha más o menos. Si clican en ese mundo, pueden elegir español y van a escuchar la traducción al español. Paulina, if you're listening, could you explain about how to do it on other devices? I don't have that memorized.
Y claro, buenas noches. Si nos están acompañando esta noche por medio de su iPad o de su teléfono, ambos tienen pueden seleccionar interpretación. Nada más asegúrense, hay unos iconos de 3 bolitas allá, usualmente a su mano derecha en la pantalla de arriba, y van a seleccionar interpretación y español. Y para asegurarse, nada más les pedimos que se pongan en mudo, y con su teléfono lo pueden hacer o presionando el asterisco número 6.
Thank you. And I will, again in English, repeat the request to please have yourself on mute until we get to the questions part of the presentation. Okay, so we had the Wolf Memorandum or the Wolf Memo that came out in the end of July. So everyone who applied after that date only got a 1-year renewal. And we still had no advanced parole. We still couldn't accept or submit new applications. And then we had an update in the Batalla case. And actually that's another consolidated case, which means that there's several cases going on at once, and it kind of got put together. So we had Batalla v. Wolf, and we also have State of New York v. Trump. And they issued an order requiring the Department of Homeland Security to reinstate DACA to how it was on September 4th, 2017. So the day before they began their changes on September 5th. But we kind of had the same problem where USCIS dragged their feet. They didn't give us information as to how anyone could go about applying for the benefit. So here we are now in December of 2020. On the 4th, there was a federal judge order that made the Department of Homeland Security fully restore the DACA program. On the 7th, USCIS finally updated their website. On the 9th, there was a status conference regarding the language that was used on the USCIS website. On the 10th, there was yet another status conference. This one was a big one, and this one was cool because what it did was it said that USCIS had to issue new EADs, your work permit, to all people who had applied between July 28th to that date. If you got just a 1-year card, then USCIS will be sending you a 2-year card for free, and they're mandated to do that. One thing I do want to flag is that there will be another court case hearing about DACA on the 22nd. And this one is going to be out of Texas, and it's with Judge Hannon, and he has issued some pretty derogatory cases about DACA in the past, so this is one to watch. We kind of have to wait until that day to see really what's going to happen. So here we are today, right? So in compliance with the order that the U.S. District Court in the Eastern District gave on the 7th of December, USCIS has to begin accepting first-time applications for DACA. They have to, now the DACA applications that were submitted in that interim that only got that 1 year, they now have to give them 2 years. They have to start accepting applications for advanced parole. And they also have to extend those work permits like we mentioned before. So if you have a 1-year work permit, you should be getting a 2-year work permit. It's just a question of when. So this is really exciting news. This means that all the people who either did not apply in the first round because they were fearful, or the people that have aged into the program now have an opportunity to apply for DACA when they hadn't been able to for the last 3 years. So this is huge for our community. And I'll just leave that up for a few seconds. Okay, so again, about the work permit, I just want to highlight this again because we have a lot of people actually that renewed from July 28th to the present, fearing that maybe something was going to happen to DACA again. And so they only got a 1-year renewal. You will be getting a 2-year renewal, and you will be getting a new work permit free of charge. And USCIS is supposed to send that to you of their own will. You shouldn't have to do anything to make that happen. So we're going to go into now, so I think we talked about what this all means. So we're fully restored to where we were before the 5th of September 2017. You can now apply for the first time. You've got 2-year DACA instead of 1. And effectively the price goes back to what it was before, because like I said, between July 28th and the present, we went to 1-year cards. And so that meant that you had to pay that fee every year instead of every 2 years. So we go back to the $4.95 just every 2 years instead of every year. And advanced parole is available again. All right, so DACA requirements. This is the big one. I want us all to kind of really pay attention here. We have to look at all 7 of these requirements. You're not allowed to have 6 of 7. You're not allowed to have 6.5 of 7. You must have all 7. Only one of them can be remedied. All the other ones either just are true for you or they are not. And if they are not true for you, then unfortunately you don't qualify. Okay, so this is kind of an opportunity to do a little bit of a self-analysis to see where you're at. Maybe you do qualify, maybe you don't. So the first thing is that you had to have been under the age of 31 as of June 15th, 2012. So that means that your birthday had to be after June 15th, 1981. So if you were born before that date, you do not qualify, even if you have all the other requirements. The second requirement is that you came to the United States before reaching your 16th birthday. That means that the day that you turned 16, you had to have been within the United States. If you turned 16 and you came to the United States the day after, you do not qualify. You had to have continuously resided in the United States since June 15th, 2007 to the time of application. So this is important because when DACA was announced on June 15th, 2012, USCIS only thought of having 5 years of continuous presence that you had to document. Well, now fast forward to 2020, we now have to document 13 years. And that's a long time. And for someone who, let's say, just aged into the program, they just turned 15, that's going to be a lot of evidence. So you do have to prove that you were in the United States from June 15th, 2007 up to the time of application. You have to be able to prove that you were physically present in the United States on June 15th, 2012, and at the time that you're making a request. So let's say you have all the qualifications, but you have now left the United States, you would not qualify. If you had all the requirements, but you weren't present on June 15, 2012, you do not qualify. You also had to show that you had no lawful status on June 15, 2012. So that means if you came in with a visa, if you had some other kind of status, you had to have had that visa expire or been outside of your status on June 15th, 2012. You must either currently be in school, have graduated from school, or have a certificate of completion from high school, obtained your GED, or be part or have a have an honorable discharge from the Coast Guard or Armed Forces of the United States. So this is the only one that I was saying that can be cured. If you have all the other requirements, but you never went to high school, you never went to school here in the United States, you could enroll in a GED program and you could then meet all the requirements for DACA. So the number 6 here is the only one that you can cure. And the 7th requirement is that you can't have certain criminal history. You can only have 2 minor misdemeanors. You can't have more than that. And you can't have any significant misdemeanors or, I'm sorry, you can't have, my goodness. You have not been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors. So like I said, no significant misdemeanors, no felonies, and no more than 2 misdemeanors. And we'll go into what that all means, because that's gibberish, right? Who even understands that?
Lily, speaking of gibberish, we
Yes.
have a couple questions coming in the chat. Do you want to address them now, or do you want to wait for all? They're very specific about different points, like clarification of those different requirements.
I'm going to break them down now, one by one. So if for some reason we still have the question afterwards, let me know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the first one, proof of identity. So we're going to go through now and talk about all the kinds of documents that you need to get together to be able to apply for DACA. There is going to be a huge amount of documentation that you're going to have to try to get together. And so I'm going to try to guide you through what kinds of things you can get together to prove each point. Okay, so the first one, your proof of identity. This one's going to do a lot of things. It's going to prove your birth date, how old you were on June 15, 2012, that you are now 15 years old. So one thing that would be kind of the best piece of evidence to get would be a passport from your home country. And then also, if you didn't have that, a lot of kids who are in school have used their school ID as long as it's a current one. So like if you have one from last year, that's not going to work. You need the one from this year. If you have a birth certificate that has a photo on it, some countries issue that. You have a birth certificate that has your photo in the corner somewhere. That would be a good piece of evidence, or any other government document showing your name and a photo of you. So proof that you came into the US before your 16th birthday. This one was tricky in 2012, and this one's going to be even trickier now that we are 7 years later, or 8 years later. So one thing that you could show would be, like, if you came in with a visa, you might have a passport stamp in your passport. You might have an I-94. That's that little piece of paper they give you when you come in with your visa. You might have school records. You might have immunization records. That's your shots. You might have medical records. You might have employment records. You might have been baptized. You might have been you might have had a child here in the United States before that date. There are so many different things that you can show to try and prove that you came in before your 16th birthday. And with a lot of these, we really just have to be creative. I remember one time I submitted a case where all we had was a picture of the person blowing out their candles on their 16th birthday. And on the back of the picture, there was something that said that it was like printed out on some day before June 15, 2012. And it was like from Rite Aid or something like that. And so we could use that to show that that piece of evidence came from the United States before that person turned 16. So you really have to use your imagination. Someone came to me this week and showed me their preschool records. So really just anything that you could use to show that you were here before your 16th birthday. So proof of your student status at the time of requesting DACA. So your best piece of evidence is going to be, if you've already graduated from high school, it's going to be your high school diploma or your certificate of completion. Certificates of completion usually come in where somebody maybe had an IEP and they didn't actually graduate high school, but they did all the criteria necessary to show that they completed the course of study. If you are still in school, then your official transcripts from that current quarter or semester is going to be your best piece of evidence. So, we started with this recording or the Zoom meeting being specifically for Cabrillo students. So if you are currently enrolled at Cabrillo, you'd want to go to the registrar's office or email the registrar's office, whatever you need to do right now to be COVID safe, and ask them how you can get a copy of your transcripts from this semester. And then the other thing you could do is show a GED certificate. Previously, we were able to have people be approved showing that they were just enrolled in a GED program. I have not seen yet that the standards have changed, so it might be possible for folks who have only just enrolled in a GED program, but have not yet completed the GED program to be able to qualify. And here's a little bit of information about how you can go about getting your GED. There are free classes. One of the biggest impediments for getting your GED, the biggest hurdle sometimes is learning English. And so through our adult education in our county, there are resources. They are, I believe, virtual, and you can do it through a Chromebook. If you have a child who's school age and has a Chromebook from their school, then you can use that as a tool to be able to take these classes to be able to become DACA eligible. All right, so proof of presence in the US on June 15, 2012. So this is the only date that you have to show the actual date. All the other pieces of evidence, it historically has been sufficient to show one piece of evidence essentially per quarter. So 4 pieces of evidence per year. So one from the spring, one from the fall, one from winter, one from summer. Some agencies will want you to bring in something from every single month. But historically, you don't have to prove specific dates except for June 15th, 2012. And so if you don't have something from specifically that date, you will have to sandwich the dates. So you'll have to show something from maybe the 1st of June and the 1st of July, as close as you can get to one date on either side of June 15th, 2012. When DACA hit in June 15th, 2012, when it was announced, many people started to collect their proof then, knowing that one day they might age into this program. So if you don't have something, check in with your parents to see if maybe they kept something for you. Also, usually school records go up to like the 10th of June or the 8th of June. And so usually you can find something that would help. Sometimes the easiest thing is to show a bank statement. You're constantly using your ATM card. So maybe you use your ATM card either on that date or around that date to be able to show that you were physically in the United States on the 15th of June, 2012. And you might be wondering why the 15th of June. That is the date that DACA was announced. And so that is the date that you have to show that you were in the United States. All right, so proof that you continuously resided in the US since June 15, 2007. This one is going to be pretty tricky. It was tricky in 2012 and it's going to be even trickier now. Back then we were talking about 5 years of evidence. Now we're talking about 13 years of evidence. For those of you, like I said, who have just aged into the program, you just turned 15, that's going to be records from when you were 2 on. So it's going to be pretty difficult for some things, and in other things, it's going to be maybe a little easier. So things that you could use to show, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out if it's better to show it in English or Spanish. I'll just leave it in English for a little while longer and then I'll switch it over to Spanish. Sorry, lost my place there. Where were we? Sorry, guys, we'll just start from here. Why is it moving on its own? Okay, so the records that you'll need to show, some things are like rent receipts. So maybe you have like a receipt that your landlord gives you every month. And you can show that you on the 1st of the month, every single month, we're paying rent. Maybe you have work evidence like your pay stubs or your W-2s. School records are usually the best piece of evidence to have because schools have to keep meticulous records of attendance. That's how schools get funding, right? To show how many students showed up every day. And so they have to show when you were there, when you were absent, when you came in late, when you were, I don't know when you were sick, but they have to have very, very, very meticulous records. And so what you could do is talk to your school district and ask them for your attendance records. They're very specific documents and you should explain that it should show every single day that you were there. And that is kind of the easiest thing to get together because you can just go to the different school districts and ask for that, and you should have a pretty good chunk of time covered. You can, and we will be doing some outreach to the schools. And if you are a teacher or administrator on this call tonight, and you would like for us to touch base with you to kind of give you some information or tips on what documents would be best to give to folks who are DACA eligible, please reach out to us, but we will be reaching out as well in January. So other things that you could collect would be your military records if you were in the military, any kind of religious documentation. Maybe you were doing your first communion or your confirmation and you have proof of coming to classes every week. Again, this is another area where we can really get creative. You can show your receipts for money that you were sending out of the country, perhaps to your family members in another country. You can show documents from your passport, your child's birth certificates. I have submitted in the past children's medical records, because if there's a 6-month-old baby, that baby is not coming to the doctor on their own, right? There's a parent or some kind of caregiver that is bringing that child, and that's usually documented in the medical records. So this is something where we need to get creative, and it's going to be a lot, but it's not impossible. You just kind of have to think about where you were during all these years and what kind of evidence you can pull together. All right, proof of immigration status. This one is kind of interesting because for most people, I would say you're proving a negative, right? How do you prove that you're here and undocumented? So really, this is only for people who had some kind of status and then no longer had the status. So this is for somebody, let's say, who came in with a visitor visa, like a B1 or a B2 visa, or a student visa or a work visa or some kind of lawful entry into the country. Whatever status you came in with had to have expired as of the 15th of June, 2012. So you would have to find proof of that. It's very rare. I've only seen maybe a handful of cases where this has come up. And another thing you could do is if you were in removal proceedings and you had some kind of removal order, deportation order, that would be a good piece of evidence too. All right, so do we still have questions about those specific things? Kate, we had questions in the in the chat box. Do we still have them? Sorry.
Matt is the chat guy, so I'm going to defer to him.
Okay.
I think he's preparing.
Great. So yeah, so Lily, one of the questions that's come up is about, I think you did touch on this, about how to document educational records. Can you just repeat that back for folks, what kinds of school records they're going to want to get?
Yeah, so there's a few different kinds. One of them is going to be proof that you either graduated school or are currently enrolled in school. So for people who have graduated, that's going to be your diploma or your certificate of completion. For those of you that are currently enrolled in school, you'll want to get your official transcripts from this semester showing that you are enrolled at this time. This gets tricky during holidays and over summers and things like that. So you just kind of do your best on that. So like, let's say you're not going to apply until July. Well, you might not be currently enrolled, but you can show your documents from the last semester ending in June, and then show that you've signed up for classes starting in August. And then the other school records that you could show, the best form of school record to show your continuous presence, so to show that you were here in the United States for those 13 years and didn't leave, would be your attendance record. And you'd have to kind of check with your district to see what exactly they call it, but every district should have some form of this. And you could just kind of explain to them what it is. It's like a printout essentially of all the days that you were in school. And what we're trying to prove here is that you didn't have big gaps. You didn't leave the United States for a huge amount of time and then come back. You have to show that you were here that whole time. Brief exits, usually we can kind of work around, but not big ones. And so you have to be able to show that you were here all this time. Things like just your transcripts, that's not going to be enough. And the reason for that is that shows that you completed that year of study, but it doesn't show when you were there. Maybe you were gone all of December and January. Maybe something happened and you dropped out of school for some time. So the attendance records are really the best form of evidence there. Another question?
Yeah, I'll read another question from the chat box. So someone asked about requirements. I know you went through those. They want to know, are letters of recommendation needed?
Generally not. The only time that you might need a letter from somebody else, generally there are two different scenarios. The biggest one would be if you have some kind of criminal problem in your past that you're trying to show was either minor or a brief lapse of judgment. DACA is discretionary. And so DACA can be denied. If the officer reviewing your application doesn't like some of the things that maybe you did in your past. Maybe they don't rise to the level to deny you outright, but you know, they're not, it doesn't look great. They can potentially deny you. And so one thing that you could do is get letters of recommendation from people to show like you've rehabilitated, you're a different person, you know, you had a brief lapse in judgment. But outside of that, like if you've never had any kind of criminal issues, then I wouldn't get any letters of recommendation. It's not really necessary. The other scenario that you might need one is if you have a gap in your records where you just don't have records for a year or 2 years or some big chunk of time. And that happens a lot for undocumented people who didn't go to school and were working, and maybe they were working under the table and they don't have a huge amount of records. So we might have kind of spotty records, but then we might include a letter from the employer or a parent or somebody who's going to swear that that person was there the whole time, never left, they saw them every day, and can state that that person meets the requirements. So unless you're in one of those two kind of categories, letters of recommendation are not necessary.
Thanks, Lily. And another question that's coming up frequently in the chat is about recommendations where people can get help applying for DACA.
Okay, so we are going to be getting into that in this next slide, the next 2 slides. Any other questions? Big ones?
There are some individual questions going into the chat box, and I just want to remind folks that we can't be giving individual legal advice on the Zoom, but we can discuss the general eligibility requirements and other elements that Lily has talked about today. If you have individual questions, we'll talk about where you can go to get help with that.
Okay, so I'll continue with the slides, and then we'll talk about more questions as they come up or in the end. I just want to remind people, because I did hear a little bit of chatter there, to please keep yourselves on mute. So how can you apply, right? You've sat with me through these eligibility requirements. You have all of them. So what do you do now? And this is kind of a brief overview. We'll go kind of a little bit deeper later. But so the first thing you want to do is you want to call a trusted representative for an eligibility screen. You've kind of gone through it with me here, but you want to make sure to get a good screening done. And when I say a trusted representative, I do mean somebody who is either accredited to provide legal services or who is an attorney. When big changes in immigration law come about, there are always, unfortunately, people who are more than willing to take advantage. And so you want to make sure that you're getting help from a trusted representative or organization who's going to have your best interest in mind and is going to protect you. Many people will tell you, yes, you are eligible because they would like to take your money from you, right? But you might not be. And immigration has come a long way in the last couple of years, and a lot of it has been negative. And so we really want to make sure that you are eligible and that you're not going to harm yourself by applying for something that you're not eligible for. So trusted representatives would be people like private attorneys, would be nonprofits that specialize in immigration law. And so we will have referral lists, and then we'll talk a little bit about that more in the next coming screens. You'll want to start collecting your documents. You can't move forward until you have the majority of your documents, if not all of your documents, ready to go. When you call for an eligibility screening, that representative should give you a list of the documents and some examples of the documents that you can start collecting. But we went through a lot of it today. I think most people are going to understand from what we've talked about what we need to get together. So that's going to be your first step. I think the first phone call is probably going to be to your school district or to your employer to see how you can get documents showing that you were here this whole time. Or if you don't have a passport, you know, making a call to your embassy or your consulate to try and get an appointment to start that process. You're going to want to save your money. So DACA is, I believe, if I'm not misspeaking, and Kate or Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe it's $495 to apply for DACA right now. And that is outside of legal fees. So depending on who you're going to entrust your case with, you might have to pay that representative for help in filling out and packaging your application. You're also just going to have some kind of like outside fees. Like if you don't have a passport and you need to get one, that's going to be some money. You're going to have to get some photographs done maybe for that passport. You're going to have to go down to Walgreens or whatever and buy those. You might have to pay for translations. If you've got a bunch of documents that are in a different language and you need them to be translated to English, you might have to pay for those documents to be translated. You'll have to pay for mailing. So you are going to want to try to save your money. You're going to want to make an appointment to start filling out your forms once you have your money and the majority of your documents together. And you also want to maybe consider about advanced parole, and we'll talk about advanced parole in just a minute. But this is a big one. This hasn't been available for 3 years, and a lot of people have come to realize how big this was after that was no longer available to them. Okay, so you're probably going to want to know how we specifically, CAB, SCIP, can help you. And it's going to be a lot of the same information. You're going to want to call for an eligibility screening. We will put you on a list, a wait list for our eligibility screening. We'll then have our staff call you back and do a screening. If you are eligible, they will give you the list of documents that you're going to have to put together, and then you will be placed on our wait list. Our wait list has already gotten fairly long, and we are going to ask for a lot of patience and a lot of grace right now. The pandemic has really stretched things in a way where we just can't address big need the way that we used to. We used to be able to have, massive application workshops where we could do like 100 people in a day. With COVID, we just can't do that. And so it's going to be slower. If you do not want to be on a wait list, you want to do it absolutely right now, we will give you a list of referrals of trusted attorneys and organizations in our area that you can contact that might have availability. You'll want to keep up with our social media accounts, our Instagram, our Facebook, to know when we might have new events. We're going to really ramp up services in January. And so you'll want to be checking in with our social media to know when those dates are, know when those events are going to be. You're still going to want to be collecting your documents. You're still going to want to be saving up your money. And then appointments for form filling will begin in January for us. We are very impacted for the next couple weeks of 2020, and so we'll be starting in January. So again, stay tuned with our social media for updates on how and when we'll be moving forward. Again, consider if you want to apply for advanced parole, and again, get a copy of our referral list.
Lily, can I make one quick note? We did put that referral sheet in the chat box.
Awesome.
As Lily mentioned, we're doing our best to serve the community coming up in these next weeks and months. If you'd like to call down some of the numbers in that list, please refer to the PDF that's in the chat.
And we will be setting aside resources and time for Cabrillo students. So if you are a Cabrillo student, current Cabrillo student, faculty or staff, when you call in to skip, please let us know that so that we can kind of flag your case and get to you as soon as we possibly can, okay? All right, so we've been talking about advanced parole a lot. What is it? What does it do? Why do we care about advanced parole? So advanced parole is like a secondary benefit to DACA. So DACA, perhaps I didn't even talk about what DACA actually is. I'm so sorry. So DACA is deferred action for childhood arrivals. And what that means is it allows the person to be in the United States and live and breathe, let's say, you know, and be safe from removal. So it's a protection from removal. But there's secondary benefits that come from DACA. The main one being work authorization, right? Your work permit. You get to have a work permit. Your work permit then gives you access to your social security number. And then depending on the state that you live in, you have other benefits like being able to apply for a driver's license or being able to apply for different kinds of employment licenses, like you could sit for the California bar exam and become an attorney or become a nurse or a doctor. So there's kind of secondary benefits that flow from DACA. And advanced parole is one of those secondary benefits. And it's something that a lot of people did not take advantage of in the first go round of DACA. And what it is a travel permit. So it allows you to travel outside of the United States for one of three reasons, either for employment, education, or humanitarian reasons. So if you've got one of these reasons, you are allowed to travel outside of the United States and then, more importantly, come back to the United States. And like I said, this benefit was terminated on the 5th of September 2017, and it has been reinstated as of December 4th of this year. And so why it's really important really comes down to future benefits. It is important for people to be able to travel, right? For school, for work, to see family members that you haven't seen in maybe 20 years or more. You know, that is huge. But there's also another component of advanced parole, which allows somebody to seek a pathway to permanent residency, to become a lawful permanent resident, and then in the future citizenship. DACA, as we know, is kind of a Band-Aid, right? It's not the end benefit. It's something that we are using in the meantime to get to another benefit or to get us to immigration reform or some other benefit in the future. We can't live like this, right? We can't live in 2-year increments, just not knowing what's going to happen every 2 years. So advanced parole is a way forward. So let me give you kind of some examples of how advanced parole might work. So let's say I have DACA. I'm in good DACA status. I don't have any kind of immigration or criminal issues that might come up and scare me later, right? I'm just a normal DACA holder, and I decide that I want to study abroad for a semester. I decide that I want to, that my job is giving me this opportunity to work in Portugal for 2 weeks, and only I can do it. I'm going to present to this panel of people, and my job is depending on me to go and do that. Or I've got a very sick family member somewhere else, and that person really needs to see me. They are not doing well, and maybe I'm the only person that can help them or to ease their pain in this time. And so it generally is that last category. It's usually I haven't seen my mom, my grandma in 10 or 15 years. They have advanced diabetes, and they're going in for surgery. They're having, an amputation or something like that. And they really need someone to be there with them to help them in the future, right? To convalesce, to heal. And I'm the only person that can do that. So I could apply for advanced parole and I could be allowed to leave and go see that person. And then when I come back, I get a stamp in my passport that says that I had a lawful entry into the United States. Now, having that lawful entry, along with this case in front of us here, Arabelli, Urabelli, those things work kind of together. And now let's say I meet Mr. or Mrs. Right, right? I fall in love and I get married to a US citizen, and that person wants to petition for me. Well, generally, I can't really move forward with that petition unless I leave and I get a waiver and things get complicated and expensive, right? But if I have that advanced parole and I have that lawful entry and I have that US citizen spouse or a child, a US citizen child who's over 21 who can apply for me, and I have those two things together, then I can apply for residency within the United States. So it's really a pathway to residency that was taken away for the last 3 years. And I can't tell you how many people I have had in front of me at my desk who have DACA, who have a US citizen spouse, but didn't apply for advanced parole when they had the opportunity. And so now they didn't move forward with their residency because they're scared to leave. They are afraid to apply for that waiver. They don't have the money to apply for that waiver. So it really is something that will put you on a pathway to residency. And I know that that sounds kind of complicated, but what it does is it allows you to have a lawful entry into the country and then be able to use that in the future. And maybe you're not married yet, you know, but maybe you will be in the future, or maybe you will have a US citizen child that turns 21 in the future. And so this is something that you could use kind of like a golden ticket to have in your back pocket, just in case you might be able to use it in the future. All right, so that really concludes our presentation, and I'm sure we have so many questions. And so unless anyone from our team has something to add, we'll probably just jump into those questions.
And so if people want to ask questions, you can put them in the chat. I know a lot of people have put questions in the chat. Maybe Matt will have some, but people can also unmute themselves, right, Lily, and ask?
Yes, they can. And I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see the chat as well, because I'm sure there's so much here. And so we can either, yeah, we can unmute ourselves. I'm just wondering if it's going to be like, 30 people talking at the same time.
At once. Yeah. I should introduce myself. I'm Kate Hinnenkamp. I'm the interim program director here at the Community Action Board Immigration Project, and we're so glad to have you joining us tonight. I'm actually going to ask if Adela would introduce herself. Are you comfortable doing that, Adela?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see all of you show up tonight. I am the Dream Research Program Coordinator at Cabrillo. I've been in this position for almost 5 years now. And so it's really great to be collaborating with CAB Santa Cruz Immigration Project, and glad that, they were able to facilitate today's session on DACA, because we've been getting so many questions, especially for new applicants. Thank you.
Thanks, Adela. And I just wanted to say, and I'll let Matt introduce himself in just a moment. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, Cabrillo students, Cabrillo staff, and community members. And Lily, this is such an information-packed presentation. And we just want to remind you, really, our purpose of this presentation is a few different things. Of course, to inform you what's new with DACA, what's changed, and then to really let you know that we are here to help. But like Matt shared in the chat, there are other trusted local agencies that are here to help. And so we will do our best to answer general questions tonight, but if you do need and have individual questions about your case, please do call us or call one of the organizations on the list. And we should have everybody's email now, so we will continue to email you all information. And I think we're gonna, I don't know if we'll send out these PowerPoint slides, but we might decide to do that. But also we are going to be sharing out information, just some kind of follow-up information for you. So thanks so much for being here, and we'll continue to be in touch.
Following up on Kate, I'd like to introduce myself as well. My name is Matthew Weisner, and I'm the directing attorney at the Santa Cruz County Immigration Project of the Community Action Board. And I want to thank Lily for the really informative presentation tonight. And just note on a couple of the questions in the chat box, which I've been doing my best to keep up with. You all have great questions. You know, a lot of these individual circumstantial questions would require a consultation with an attorney or an accredited representative. So we won't be addressing all of the individual questions today, but I did see some repeated questions that I can touch on briefly. A couple of you asked whether continuous presence documentation would require you prove your presence in every single month for the last 13 years. And, you know, while we can't speak to any particular case without seeing the records, you know, having gaps of 1 month or even 2 months will not necessarily mean you don't qualify, but we generally recommend that you try to document every month, or at the very least every quarter. That would be every 2 or 3 months that you show something. So, you know, if you have those small gaps of 1 or 2 months here and there, I would suggest you consult with an immigration lawyer or an accredited representative to take a look at your records. That does not necessarily disqualify.
All right. Yeah, I do see that quite a bit coming up here in the chat. Folks who are really nervous about gaps in physical presence, and like Matt said, and like we had explained earlier, it's really something that's going to be very tricky. Again, we're talking about 13 years of records, and so there's just going to be gaps, I think, for most people. In general, you don't want to see gaps of more than 2 months. So 3 months is usually the kind of cutoff that I and probably Matt have used in the past. The very minimum, 1 document per quarter, but it's not something that would, let's say, maybe immediately disqualify you if you have, you know, maybe a 4-month gap or something like that. That's where that kind of secondary evidence comes in, or like a letter from somebody that says that they've known you the whole time and they can attest that you've never left. And also, just like I said, being very creative. If we really think about it, most people will have documents. You just have to think about what you were doing. And it can be anything. I mean, it can be, maybe you got a speeding ticket, like maybe you got just whatever you might have, something that has your name, that appears to have come from within the United States, and a date. So, I mean, I've seen some pretty wild stuff through the years, and I'm sure, Matt, you have as well. I think I've submitted like AA records, perhaps. I mean, like just whatever you might have to show that you were within the United States during those days. And so it's just something where we really have to just be creative. A lot of people are asking about original documents versus copies. You always want to send in copies to immigration unless they specifically ask for an original. And with DACA, that's going to be copies of everything. The only originals would be maybe on your forms. We would send in an original signature. A lot of questions are coming in about financial help. And there's kind of two layers of financial help there. There's financial help to apply for DACA itself, right? The fee that you're going to pay to USCIS, the $495, and then there's the legal fees. So depending on who helps you, the legal fee could be taken care of, right? So if you, let's say, came through SCIP or another of the nonprofits, perhaps that application would be free or very low cost to you. But then the $495 is really where most people are going to have to, it's going to be a struggle perhaps. There are funds that are being put together. I think Hannah is here and maybe can talk about that. And yes, we're gonna have Paulina actually come in. If you're still there, Paulina, if you can unmute yourself and talk a little bit about any funds that might be available through any kind of organizations or TIC that you know of right now.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. So good evening, everyone. Paulina Moreno once again. We're putting together the criteria for who will be eligible, but we are raising funds to be able to support those that need to apply for DACA, initial DACA applications. I know that there's a need even in renewals, but for this first round of funding, we want to focus on initial DACAs. And so we'll be sharing more information. I know we have your contact info, so we'll be sharing more info either via email or, you know, I encourage you, if you don't already follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and we will post more information about how to apply for some of that funding that we're raising funds for.
Thank you, Paulina. One question that is coming up repeatedly is how to get placed on our wait list. And the way to do that would be to call our number at 831-724-5667. It's been put into the chat box several times. I'll repeat it one more time, 831-724-5667. We did have a comment that, you know, they've tried several times. Our phone lines are being inundated right now. So again, we'll just ask for patience and for a little grace. We're doing the best that we can, but there is a huge need in the community. And so we're doing the best that we can to address that. And we'll just ask you to keep trying and keep bearing with us. And Matt has put in the local attorney referral list into our chat box as well. So if you would like to try to look through for other avenues with other local organizations and other local attorneys, you can download that from the chat box. Somebody asked if the records can be from work. Absolutely. If you have pay stubs, that would be a great thing to submit. Things that don't really help, surprisingly, are things like taxes. And the reason for that is that it shows that you were within the United States during that year, and it shows that you earned money that year, but it doesn't say when. And so let's say you earned all that money in January of that year, and then you left and you were out of the country from February to December. Immigration would have no way of knowing when you were here. And so like W-2s are not super helpful. Your taxes are not super helpful, except for to prove that you were there that date that you submitted it, right? Or that you signed it. So better things would be like if you had an attendance record at work or if you had pay stubs. A lot of specific questions. So again, if you have specific questions about how you can apply for different benefits or if you qualify for a different benefit, I would call that same number and see if we can get you in for a consultation over the phone to address that specific question and that specific need for you. Let's see. Looks like there's some questions about different names. This happens quite often. People get married, they change their name, they use nicknames, their name is wrong on their birth certificate. So one thing that you would do is most likely you would just write all your AKAs, you're also known as names on the forms. and that would be sufficient to be able to show any kind of discrepancies. So that happens all the time. So I wouldn't stress yourself out if your school records have one name, but you go by another name, or that your passport or birth certificate has some other name that's not exactly that name.
Lily, can I jump in with a quick one?
Yeah.
We're actually joined by Beth Carr here, who's the CEO of the Santa Cruz Community Credit Union. And I do believe she reminded me that they are still supporting DACA applicants with their fees in a low-cost loan. So there are resources available. You know, we're doing our best to raise funds. United We Dream is out there. Our local credit union is there. So please don't give up. If you're having trouble with the fee, if that's your only barrier, please reach out to those sources and we can do our best to help you come up with the funds.
Can you repeat that information?
Yes, absolutely. The Santa Cruz Community Credit Union is one local source of low-cost loans. And there are other sources, like Paulina mentioned earlier, we're working on raising funds through the Community Action Board, as well as some of the other local institutions. I know United We Dream may have resources they can direct you to as well.
Yeah. And I think that we're still in the very early days, you know, of DACA being, let's say, reinitiated for first-time applicants. And so when DACA came about in 2012, it did take some months for the funding to come in and for agencies to kind of pull together to get funding for applicants. And so, as Matt said, and thank you, Matt, for saying that, don't give up hope. There will be funding opportunities. It might not be just right this second. There are some opportunities now, but there probably will be more in the future. We just have to kind of hang tight and wait. Right now, everyone's kind of just scrambling to put together, you know, their paths forward and try to figure out how we're all going to address this need. So even if you don't find a funding source right now, it could be that in a month or 2 months, you might be able to find one. Okay. All right. Looks like we have a question about somebody coming in to the US in April of 2007. So as long as you were in the US prior to June 15, 2007, but also meet all the other requirements, then you would be eligible. A lot of times, unfortunately, what happens with folks is that, you know, we talked about all those requirements. They'll have 6 of 7, but they're missing one. And so they won't be able to qualify. And it's really a lapse in this benefit. And I wish that it could cover everybody, but the requirements are extremely specific. So if you went through those requirements with us and there was one where you went, I don't have that one, definitely still get screened to make sure, but it's likely that you might not qualify.
Lily, can I chime in with 1 or 2 other things?
Yes, please.
Thanks to Maria, who also added another resource in the chat box. The Mission Asset Fund, I believe it's called, is another resource. I don't know their current loan requirements, but you can also check with them. And one other of the elements that Lily went through earlier that I was hoping to just repeat for folks that we're getting a lot of questions in the chat is about the educational requirement. And this is one that causes a lot of confusion. So there's 3 ways to satisfy it. You can either prove that you're currently enrolled in school, that's number 1, or that you've graduated from high school with your diploma, that's the second way. The third way to show that you meet the educational requirement is that you've gotten your GED certificate. You don't have to do all 3, you just need 1. So I know a lot of the questions are, you know, I'm enrolled in college, but I graduated high school. You just need 1 of the 3. So if you have your high school diploma, you're good with that requirement.
Beautiful. Thank you, Matt, for clarifying that. A lot of these requirements have many pieces to them. And so there's a lot of room for confusion. So again, as Kate was saying, the point of this this Zoom is to kind of familiarize ourselves with DACA, what it is, what it isn't, and how one can be eligible and how you can start to put together your information to submit an application. But it in no way should replace a consultation with a trusted legal advisor to make sure that you do qualify and to help you through this process. Matt, are there any other questions that are jumping out at you that you saw that that should be addressed?
No, Lily, I think you did a great job covering it. And I know that people may still have questions outstanding at the end of this. You know, we do recommend that you check that referral sheet we put in the chat, or you try to reach out to our office. You know, consultations with a lawyer are confidential. I know there's some concerns about some of the sensitive nature of these conversations, especially with individual information like this. It takes a lot of trust. So we do recommend that you speak with a licensed attorney or accredited representative who is bound by that confidentiality to protect your information.
Great.
One more point I'll add, this came into the chat. There is a way to check your immigration records if there are any that exist. That's called the Freedom of Information Act, has a process by which any person has the right to access their own immigration file. Not everything may appear, and not everyone may have an immigration file, particularly if they entered undocumented and have had no contact with immigration in the past. But there is a process by which one can fill out an application for that Freedom of Information Act or FOIA request and try to get a copy of their immigration records. It can often take several months to do so, but that's another thing that an immigration lawyer can help you do. The FOIA process is not particularly difficult, but there is an application that has to be submitted to immigration. So just wanted to make people aware, if they have questions about their own immigration history and their record, that's something that they can investigate.
One thing that I did, a couple things that I'm just scrolling through the chat. I'm so sorry. There's so much to try to read through. So if we don't get to everyone, I do apologize. Someone asked about their passport and it having expired. So one of the requirements is that you present a valid government issued ID. And so this person, for example, has a passport that expired in June of this year. So you would need to get a new one. And like I said, with school IDs, if you're currently in school, let's say you're a junior in high school or maybe even a sophomore in high school, you don't have a driver's license yet, you don't have an ID, you can use your school ID as long as it's the one for the current year. Okay, I think most of the other questions we have addressed. So as a reminder, we are recording this session. It will be up on our website, and I believe on our Facebook page, Paulina. And please do check in with our social media accounts to have updates on how to continue. We are also planning to have more meetings like this in the future. So again, check with our social media to know what the next one will be, to tell your friends and your family members who weren't able to be here tonight, to join us and to continue this dialogue and to continue talking. As we did state in this chat, there is another court decision happening on the 22nd of this month that can affect, again, the status of DACA. And so we definitely want to keep in touch and make sure that we are getting good information. And another question that I saw was about people who might have applied after the Supreme Court decision, but before the Wolf memo came out. So people who applied, but then the application was kicked back to them, whether or not those people would have to apply again. And the answer would be yes. Immigration at this moment does not have an application pending for you. So you'd have to submit again. Hopefully your fees were returned to you and you will be able to redo that. The only question I would have is I have not looked at the forms and whether or not you would need to do new forms. If there's been a change, an update to the forms, you might need to redo them. But that should be fairly simple. The local attorney list is in the chat box. If you scroll up.
I believe that because that's an internal link on our program shared drive, I don't think that just sharing
working?
the link that we use to access it
Okay.
will work. So we need to find a different way to share that out.
Okay.
Paulina, do you have any tips on that? I think that's technically challenging to share in the chat, but we can email it to everybody.
Yes, if it's okay with everyone, if we will follow up with an email with the information that was discussed, and again with the link on how you can access the recording of this session. Thank you.
And we can probably post that attorney list on social media also. We can talk internally about that.
Yeah.
And one more point I'll add is we are going to follow up on this conversation. I saw this come up in the chat as well. Next Tuesday, the 22nd, at the same time at 6 p.m., we're going to be preparing a follow-up conversation. I know Lily did a great overview of where we are, how we got here, where things may be going in the future. That conversation will be more focused on sort of group screening, and we'll provide a checklist for people who believe they are eligible and want to start preparing. I think we're getting a lot, at least in this past week, of folks who are in the process of preparing their evidence and want to start moving their case forward. So that will be for folks to have an idea of what documents they need to collect and how they can best prepare for those appointments with their lawyers and prepare to submit their applications.
Thank you, Matt. I totally forgot to mention that. So I appreciate you reiterating that. Would it be helpful to folks for me to screen share again just the list of requirements so that everyone can take a screenshot of it? Because I'm seeing a lot of questions come up again around eligibility. So I'm wondering if that would be helpful, or should we just sign off, or what?
Yes, please, Lily. I think that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Okay, so again, our phone number, and then I'm going to scroll back to our list of requirements. So if you need to do a screenshot, now would be the time. Okay, so here's our phone number again, and then bear with me because my computer's being a little bit funny and it keeps going on its own. So, so here's another screenshot that you might need. The information about GEDs and how you can sign up for classes to get enrolled and start that process if you need to do that. And then, okay, here we go. So here's the DACA requirements in English. So I'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and screenshot that. And again, I just want to reiterate, because I keep seeing it come up in the chat, you must meet all the requirements. So if there's one requirement that you don't see, let's say you were born before the date of June 15th, 1981, you do not qualify. If you came in to the US after June 15th, 2007, you do not qualify. So you must meet all of the requirements. So here it is in English, and then we'll move on to Spanish. And then here we go. You can go ahead and screenshot that. Anything else that we need to screenshot? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for your time again. Thank you to everyone for sharing your evening with us. I know that was a long meeting and a lot of information. And thank you to our partners who are on this call with us, Adela, everyone at Cabrillo, my coworkers who have been working tirelessly to try to develop a plan to meet the needs of our community, Matt, our director, Kate, Paulina, Hannah, and all of our staff that are on this call. And just thank you again for sharing your evening with us and being here and chatting about this really exciting new venture that we're all going to go into together.
Thank you so much, Lily. Thank you also to Oscar for the interpretation. And we will email everybody an invitation to the next Zoom. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Hello?
Hi, Angel. We're wrapping up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have one last question, if you could
Okay,
answer.
and this is not a private forum, so make sure you don't share any personal information. But if you have a general question, go for it.
It's fine.
Well, no, please don't share any personal information. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what evidence would you say I need to gather?
So that's what this whole presentation was about.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So
I came here.
yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do a private consultation like this with you. So what you can do, we are going to share out a bunch of information over email. And then if you'd like to, I think, wasn't I emailing with you earlier today?
Yeah, I think you were.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
I sent you the list.
Any way I can
Is there any way you could what?
say that again?
Oh, I sent I sent you the list of what I need to know, what we need to know to add you to our wait list. So if you send me all that information, we can add you to the wait list. We do have about 200 people already on the wait list, but we're just going to start working through it in the new year. Are you a student or staff at Cabrillo?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Yeah, so we would be, yeah, we're just working through the list. So send me your information if you haven't already, and then we will be emailing out general information.
Yeah, I sent you my email and my phone number. Is that all?
Okay. Yeah, then we'll have you on the list.
Okay, that's all I need to be on the list?
Yep, that's all you need to be on the list. And then, like I said, we will send you some like checklists of how you can know for sure if you're eligible, and then what information you should start collecting.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Have a good night.